Nasser was a smart guy. Egypt is a very interesting place. As you can see there on the map, it's green, which is kind of a rarity in the Middle East. As a result, it is relatively insulated from the rest of the world, or at least it was until some enterprising human somewhere invented a sailboat or learned to domesticate a camel. At that point, Egypt was left behind. So for the first 2,000 years of human history, Egypt was sequestered. It was grand. It was the only civilization really of note that had more than one city. But once people developed the technology to breach the desert barriers and reach Egypt, by definition, the Egyptians were behind. And as a result, they lost control over their own territory. Until the 20th century, the last time the Egyptians ruled themselves was 30 BC, over almost 2,000 years of continuous foreign rule. Nasser realized that. He realized that if Egypt was ever going to matter ever again or have any control over its own destiny, that had to change. And so he took a page from the Soviets and the Turks, and he wanted to make the military into the vanguard of modern Egypt. Use the military to import foreign money, to import foreign technology, and remake Egypt into a more sustainable, more functional state. Problem was that he died. He was replaced by Sadat and also ultimately by the Mubarak clan. And the Mubaraks had this really clever idea. They said, okay, the military is in charge of everything economically and politically and obviously militarily. How about we turn this into an old pharaonic-style dynasty? And Gamal came along. He was like, we can privatize everything that the military controls to my people. And then when Dad dies, I'll take over. Well, the military had a problem with that because it was challenging the position that Nasser gave for them. As a result, the military indirectly joined forces with this little Facebook crowd. Remember that at the height, the very height, the day that Mubarak resigned, the height of the protests, 600 to 700,000 people were in the street, out of a population of 83 million. More people showed up the first day of the Czech protests. More people showed up on the first day of the Iranian Revolution. Only 2% of the population participated in downtown Cairo. That's it. That wasn't a revolution. It was a military coup. Why do I say it's a military coup? Well, generally on the first day of a popular revolution, you don't dissolve the Constitution and dismiss the parliament. Those are generally no-nos in a democracy. Now, the military is saying that, in a few weeks we will talk about a possible schedule for new elections. We'll see. The one thing you do need to worry about from an economic point of view, luckily, from an economic point of view, not much is going to change. The military is still in charge. But things that were privatized to Gamal's clan are going to be brought back under the military's aegis, the banks being the most important of that. One of the nice bright spots of what happened with Gamal's cronyism is he actually did make the banks functional because the banks were being used by the military just as personal cash cows. That's going to happen again. He's my favorite dictator. I just love the staff. The elephant. Now you had a similar beginning in the case of Libya. You had a leader who wanted to remake the society. He wanted to use the military to do it. However, whereas Nasser died and couldn't really see his plan through to fruition, Gaddafi obviously hasn't and decided that, the more money I have, the better. So he impoverished the rest of the country and himself became radically rich. But you've got a different political system here than you have in Egypt. In Egypt, they have insulation, so even during all those eras of foreign occupation, there was still a very strong Egyptian identity going back millennia. You never have that here. You can see there's not a lot of green. Egypt is a thin strip of a country, 1,800 kilometers long, and at its thickest point, only about 40 kilometers thick, in some places only 4 or 5. And so anyone who has a rowboat has been able to, a little feedback here, anybody who has a rowboat has been able to slide into any part of the coast, disrupt whatever control is there locally, and split the country apart. As a result, the Italians only created Libya in the 1930s as part of a colonial rejiggering of borders. There's no independent identity. The West is separate from the East. In fact, they're separated by 600 kilometers of completely empty desert. Imagine what it would be like if you are in Tripoli and you're trying to control things in Benghazi. That's 800 kilometers away. That's like driving from Calgary to Toronto. It's 2 days in the car in order to put down a rebellion. Not very good. The Italians show up with one boat and they've conquered your country. And so while we have a real protest there were more people on day one of the Libyan revolution, despite only having 6.5 million people, than there were on the final day of the Egyptian revolution, a country with 14 times as many population. We don't have a real civil war here. You've got Gaddafi in the west, you've got the rebels in the east, you've got empty desert between them. They can't get at each other, especially now with the no-fly zone. The truck up there, that is what the Africans call technicals. It's basically a pickup with a heavy weapon fuse mounted on the back of it. That weapon specifically is a rocket pod from a Soviet Hind helicopter. Kind of cool to cruise around the desert in. The opposition, we believe, has 60 or 70 of these things, but they can't stand up to a tank. And so they fly across the desert, they meet a tank, they get shot up, and the ones that can fly right back. And so we have a stalemate, and it will not be broken at all until foreign forces, ground forces, go in and off Gaddafi himself. At present, no one's committed to doing that. And so at present, we have 2 states. From an energy point of view, this is probably fine, because the majority of the oil is in the east. And if this can be consolidated under some sort of neo-colonial regime, most likely, it can still function. But the days of Libya as a united country are probably over. The day of Libya having an independent foreign policy that matters at all, probably over. And considering they backed a lot of unsavory folks, that might be a good thing. Not all Middle Eastern states are created equal, however. Here we got Iran. Desert, mountain. Invading either of those is kind of a bitch. Invading the two that overlay each other is almost impossible. Remember the movie 300, 1,000 Nations of Persia? Not too far off. Right now there are about 300 ethnic groups in Persia. Now, you can't occupy this area, but it's still hard to unify it into a single entity. What the Iranians have done is form a 1 million-plus man army and occupy themselves. So you've got this place that's almost impossible to invade in the first place. It's got a military force designed to control its own ethnicities. Not a nice place to live if you don't happen to be Persian. That's 49% of the population. 3,000 years of ethnic consolidation and an occasional genocide, and it's still only 50% Persian. Also means because you have no rivers, and because mountains are kind of difficult to develop, you're going to be ridiculously capital poor all the time. Iran is one of the poorest states in the world, and if you remove the oil wealth, you've actually removed almost half the economy. What we have here is a religious map, pink being Shia, purple being Sunni, and the red being the conservative brand of Islam that the Saudis favor. A lot of oil in question. Now, we don't see Iran as being in danger of a revolution. You remember the Green Revolution from last summer? Had support through all the major groups. You even had a split within the regime itself. All the pieces were in place if you wanted to have a real revolution. It lasted 8 days. They're very good at internal control here. They're not worried about this Arab Spring business that's going around the region. The concern we have is that should you have a split, should you have an Arab Spring, for example, on the Arab side of the Persian Gulf, you've got a very different problem here. You've got the problem of the Straits that the Iranians have shown that they're willing to mess with from time to time. And of course, you've got stability going on, or instability problems going on the other side of the Gulf. The Arab Spring spreads here, you've got some severe problems. I got ahead of myself. The only thing that's holding Persian power in check right now is the fact that the United States still has about 40,000 troops in Mesopotamia. I know that the talk is for a full pullout. The U.S. is probably going to leave 10 to 20 as a footprint just to make sure that the Persians don't roll through here. There's simply too much energy at stake. Same map, different colors, showing the oil assets. Ramallah, the superfield in southern Iraq, Shia population zone. Greater Bergen, the superfield in southern Kuwait, Shia population zone. Gwar, the superfield in eastern Saudi Arabia, Shia population zone. Exports for all three go through Shia ports. The Iranians are looking across there like Arab Spring. This is a great idea. Doesn't matter if you have an overthrow, doesn't matter if you have chaos, doesn't matter if you have a civil war. If you can shatter Arab power on the southern side of the Gulf, that's everything that Persia has been pushing for the last couple of millennia. The spot to watch specifically is right here. This is Bahrain, a little island joined by a causeway to Saudi Arabia. This is an area that is not just majority Shia, but is 75% Shia. That's the citizenry. That doesn't include the chunk of the population that are foreign guest workers, which is actually outnumbers the citizens. A good portion of those are Shia as well. A good portion of them are actually Persian. If the Iranians can flip Bahrain, then they're going to be working very aggressively on Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi, because these areas know that they don't have the stability that Gaddafi can count on. UAE, it's 80% expat workers, mostly South Asian. Kuwait, majority Shia. Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud is only 800,000 people out of a population of about 20 million. And so they don't destroy their people like Gaddafi has. They bribe the hell out of them. But there's only so far that money can take you, and the intelligence system that the Iranians have to manage their own people is remarkably good abroad as well as internally. So keep an eye on Bahrain.